Welcome everybody to the very first episode of No Streetlights C.O.R.E. This is a brand new series that Aaron and I are going to be bringing to you. Something that has been in the works now for a couple of months. We've bounced the idea around about how we want to reach people and give them actionable steps with no fluff, no mess, nothing in between, just straight up, this is what's going on out there in the world, and this is what you can do about it.
We want to get right to the core of the issues that many of us struggle with, especially for those of you like Tim who are battling anxiety and overthinking. And for those of you like me who wake up with the weighted blanket of depresso.
Yeah, this is kind of like the trimmed down version of the podcast. If you don't got an hour to an hour and a half time to spend listening to us work our way through a Shawshank Mile or two with a guest, then come join us over here and we're going to cut straight to it.
We've always been informative and engaging, but the thing we've been lacking on that we really want to drive home are practical tips. Like, we've already got the conversation aspect down. I feel like each of you listening, you feel like you're sitting here with two friends who get it, but we need to help you get better. That's the whole point.
So whether you're tuning in during a late night drive, morning jog, or you're just curled up on the couch, welcome. We're glad you're here. Let's shine a light on today's topic. And even if there are no streetlights on this road, we're going to navigate it together. Today, we're going to be shining a light on something that a lot of people struggle with, but they don't always talk about openly or talk about at all. And that's mental health misdiagnosis.
A very simplistic way to look at this would be, it's like having the wrong name tag in front of your psychiatrist. Oftentimes we do this because we don't want to feel like we're rocking the boat. You know, a lot of us have very strong conditioning towards authority. You know, there are 100 studies I could go into about that, but I think if we all just take a moment to take a breath, you can think about a time where you've done something just because you were told to, not because it was the right thing to do. You've got to get in the driver's seat sometimes with your therapist.
Therapist, I hardly know a thist.
Theseus's ship. I haven't even read the Communist Manifesto, Leon. Why do you keep suggesting I do that?
Why do you keep suggesting that? This is a pretty huge deal. So, Aaron, let's break it down. And what do we mean by a misdiagnosis in the mental health community?
That's a great question, Tim, and one we explored really in depth in our episode with Sammy Marker. But the long and short of it is, mental health misdiagnosis basically means you've been given the wrong label for what you're experiencing. A doctor or therapist might say you have one condition, depression for example, but you actually have something else, like bipolar disorder or PTS. It's like a case of mistaken identity, but with your mental health.
It's important to understand in the world of health in general, whether it's physical health, mental health, or whatever additional healths are existing out there, spiritual health is the third pillar.
Yep, what's up?
It's important to understand that there's overlapping symptoms. Nothing is clear cut. You know, you can't just test somebody's blood and say, hey, they got depression.
Check this out. They've been looking for blood tests, x-rays, any kind of physical indicators of mental illness since this field came about. I don't think we can hold our breath. We need to, like Sammy said, stop coddling, stop demonizing or ostracizing, and just drive.
Yeah, and I think what makes this such an interesting topic is pretty much if you're on the receiving end of a misdiagnosis, you start getting really confused. You think to yourself, why am I not getting better, or is it my fault? But often it's because you've been given the wrong map, you know, and honestly, you're just lost.
Exactly. And it's much more common than people realize. Some studies show that misdiagnosis can be as frequent as 1 in 3 people who have a serious psychiatric condition have dealt with it before. 1 in 3 people could be walking around with the wrong diagnosis. That's a huge number of people.
Yeah, it's a lot of trial and error, whether the doctor is going to be able to fully tell you exactly what's going on, or they can only kind of extrapolate based off of the information you're giving them. It's very difficult. If you've ever been on the receiving end of a misdiagnosis, it can also feel very confusing. You might think to yourself, well, this just doesn't feel right, or maybe I'm broken, maybe I'm just uncurable. But the truth is, you're honestly just heading to the wrong place. You got to get back on the right path, man.
Yeah. Whenever I came back stateside and started talking with a therapist about my mental health, I felt like they were just throwing different medications at me, trying to get me to function normally, which was a bit dismissive. But the doctor had to assume that I had depression because of what I was telling them. I hadn't told them about all my previous trauma and all the stuff that happened in my childhood like everyone else. So they didn't even think to bring up PTS until recently. I was down at the VA clinic and I was like, yeah, I've been depressed since I was a kid because I got beat a lot and felt like I was alone. And they were like, maybe it's not depression. Maybe it's something bigger.
Yeah. And unfortunately, Aaron, your situation isn't an isolated one. Luckily, it also means you're not alone if you're somebody who has suffered from a misdiagnosis or currently feel like you are.
This is oftentimes more an art than a science. Something you might find interesting, I know I did. The National Alliance on Mental Illness has a blog that talks about how 2 different psychiatrists can see the same person and come up with 2 different diagnoses. It's that subjective.
Let's talk a little bit about personal experience in this particular area. And if you don't mind, Aaron, I think I got something in the chamber for it. You ready?
I'm ready.
Awesome. I was never necessarily misdiagnosed, okay? But my journey can kind of show you that things can be missed. It's just as important to talk about that as it is misdiagnosis, and just stick with me on this ride here, okay? A few years ago, I was in a dark place. I had developed a pretty heavy dependence on alcohol, and deep down, I knew it wasn't really just about the drinking. I don't know exactly what I'm doing, so I went to go and get that portion treated. Essentially, I went to go see a professional who runs a program that is meant to help people who are suffering with substance abuse disorder. Unfortunately, I was thinking that it most likely was something different than the drinking. In fact, I had even considered that it might be PTSD, but I never said this out loud. I just kind of walked in and said, hey, I need some help.
Just out of curiosity, was this inpatient or outpatient that you ended up attending?
Well, that's what's interesting is I didn't attend either. In fact, I never even got help. I never got a psychological evaluation. They were interested in sending me to get treatment, but the problem was because of how my transfer was sitting, it just wasn't going to be feasible. So I ended up never being seen for it.
That must have felt really invalidating. You know, you're finally doing the right thing, asking for help. And the response was basically like, well, this isn't really a great time for that.
I eventually got seen by another doctor after I had put down some stuff on a yearly evaluation. And they said, hey, you might be suffering from anxiety. I said, really? They're like, let's go a little bit deeper into this. I told them what was going on to the best of my ability. And they said, nah, you don't meet the threshold, actually. We're going to recommend you go see somebody else. But by that point, I had kind of already put my foot down and said, I'm going to go talk to somebody else myself. I got a second opinion from a second doctor, and they said, yeah, you have a generalized anxiety disorder. And within 2 weeks, they got me set up to go see the right doctor, to get the right medications, and put me on the right path, which honestly has been a game changer for me. So my story isn't about a misdiagnosis, but it's about stuff that was almost missed, and that could have been just as detrimental.
Yeah, that's a key part of this conversation is not misdiagnosis, but missed diagnosis.
Yeah.
Whenever you're overlooked or you're told you're fine when you know you're not.
Yeah, it really harkens back to this thing that you've been saying lately over on the podcast, Aaron, but ask the second question. I know you've kind of marketed it as a separate thing, but asking the second question, how I would recommend it is go see a different doctor, get a secondary opinion.
For our old heads, that's shine your light versus be your own light.
Yeah.
And, you know, really quick, I just want to mention again, Samantha Marker, episode 83, very powerful story talking about having a plethora of diagnoses, as Tim said. she knew it wasn't agoraphobia and specific fear of vomiting. It was emetophobia specifically. So she had to step up to the plate, advocate for herself, and to use the analogy I've been using most often is she got in the driver's seat. She said, "This is where we're going. And if you're not headed there with me, get out."
Yeah. And what's incredible too is, for better or for worse, her story's not unique. We've had a lot of people on the podcast who's come on here and told us that whether they simply hadn't been caught with whatever they're actually facing, doctors telling them it's X, Y, and Z when it's actually P, Q, and O. Once the right diagnosis comes into view, it does feel like everything starts to make sense.
Yeah, it's a lot like you said about the whole map analogy. You have to know where you're headed in order to know how to get there. If I'm dealing with PTS symptoms and I get labeled as merely depressive, I'm not going back and fixing those triggers and that trauma. I'm only trying to boost my mood so that I can continue to mask effectively.
So let's say you're listening to this and you're thinking, all right, guys, cool. Thank you for all that beautiful information, but I suspect I might have a misdiagnosis. What now? Well, don't worry. We're not going to leave you hanging in the dark. We're going to get here to some actionable steps. This is No Streetlights C.O.R.E after all, and we want to guide you through the dark spots.
So we have a handful of steps you can take if you think you might be misdiagnosed, or even if you just want to double check your diagnosis. I'll go through them one by one, and we can chat about each one. You ready?
Hell yeah. I got my notebook out. I'm ready to rock and roll, brother.
Your left foot. This first step is going to be to trust your instincts and get a second opinion. This is the one I've been harping on about getting in the driver's seat. You are in charge. Another great friend of the show, I want you guys to deduce who it is, has been seeking an ADHD diagnosis because they know the problem they're facing in their life and they know what it is. They just have to listen to that gut feeling and step into the driver's seat of their life.
Yeah, in my particular line of work, understanding and recognizing that gut feeling can be a lifesaver, and it can save you a lot of legwork too. Sometimes that also means you have to put in a little bit of extra legwork. It's like walking into a room and knowing something is off. You can tell, you just have to figure out what it is. So trust that.
And a big thing to recognize here, if someone knows what they're talking about, they're able to defend their opinion. So if a doctor has diagnosed you with something and you have evidence that it might be something else, they'll either be able to change their opinion based off the new evidence like a scientist, or if they get emotional and try and just defend their incorrect opinion, maybe a second opinion is where you need to go. Right foot, keep note of your symptoms. Keep a record of what you're going through. This is something that really helped me realize how bad my depression had gotten a couple years back in Virginia Beach. Have a little, for me, it was a scratch piece of paper. Something that Tim would find a lot of success with is a mood tracking app. Jot down what you're experiencing day to day. Note your moods, your sleep, energy, triggers, big events, behavior patterns, or how intense your feelings are. Over a few weeks or months, you're gonna have enough data to pick out a trend.
Yeah, this is one of my personal favorite out of the steps we're providing you all today. This one helps you validate you. You're sitting there and you're thinking to yourself, am I overreacting? Maybe it wasn't a panic attack I had 2 weeks ago. You go back and you look at it and you're like, actually, I've written down panic attack quite a bit. I feel like I am suffering from panic attacks. Not only does that make you feel better about your personal experience, but whenever you go in and actually tell the doctor what it is you're suffering from, or, the symptoms you've been struggling with, you'll have all of that data. You have those possible patterns that you can refer back to. Hey, every week I've been having panic attacks pretty frequently in the afternoon. I don't know why.
I think what we're getting at here is it's very easy to forget details you may have noticed. Whenever you're sitting down with your clinician, our brains can go blank. It might feel like performance anxiety, or you might want to downplay what you're going through. But if you have notes, you're going to be able to provide that full picture. On March 3rd, I was so depressed I stayed in bed all day. And on the 5th, I felt on top of the world. And that kept going for the next 3 days. That could point to something like bipolar patterns, being depressed one day and then riding a high for 3 days shortly thereafter.
Getting that confidence to kick in your doctor's door and say, look, this is what I've been dealing with.
Yeah. The next step, we're back on our left foot, so it's going to look a little similar, but it's advocating for yourself during your appointments. This is incredibly important. Speak up. Challenge your clinician. They should be able to defend their point. And really, you should carry this over to every aspect of your life. You should feel comfortable asking, what makes you sure that this is the correct diagnosis? Or could it be something else? I have been looking into bipolar type 2, and I think that really aligns with what I've been experiencing. Again, don't be a passenger. Get involved in the process. Take the wheel.
Yeah. Take it from the guy who has social anxiety in accordance with his generalized anxiety disorder. Doctors, they can be intimidating. I'm not going to lie. They're authority figures. They walk in with their lab coats and their stethoscopes, and you're just like, damn, these guys really know what they're talking about. Who am I to question them? Well, you are the one living your experience. That's what gives you the power to question what it is they're saying. They're not going to be offended. They're going to be professional and tell you, yeah, I did consider bipolar 2. It is something that I looked in for you, but here's the reason why I settled on X, Y, or Z instead. And hey, that's going to help you build trust with your doctor, and you're going to feel more confident about the diagnosis that they do end up giving you.
Another key point is being honest and thorough whenever you're describing what you're going through. Oftentimes, the reason we get misdiagnosed is because we didn't tell them about our childhood trauma, absentee parents, or suicidal ideations in a loved one. There is so much information out there. Any detail you provide could be the clue that cracks the case.
Something, and this is a little bit of a pro tip, especially if you have a hard time advocating for yourself, bring somebody you trust into your appointments with you. My wife and I, we're always there on each other's appointments. And that's because a lot of the times we can bring up the things that we might miss during our conversations with the doctor. Hey, don't forget to mention how X, Y, and Z happens every time you X, Y, and Z. Oh, hey, yeah, I completely forgot about that. There's nothing wrong with having a second set of eyes and a second set of ears in that appointment with you.
So, step 4, educate yourself, but do it wisely. Knowledge is power to a point.
Yeah, the amount of times that I have found myself on WebMD just scrolling through symptoms and deciding that, hey, I'm probably dying of some kind of rare tropical disease that no one's ever heard of except WebMD, or I'm suffering from 7 different personality disorders. It's happened more than once, not too many times, but enough for me to be like, yeah, that's probably not the best source of information.
Yeah, I would just argue that piling crap on top of crap doesn't build a snowman. So you really want to make sure that you're doing this in a wise way. Pursue true knowledge and don't just convince yourself of the thing that you want to be convinced of. Stick to credible sources. And also something that can really help if you have anxiety like Tim would be set a time limit so that you're not fueling your anxiety. Learn what you can, find out what can get misconstrued, what wires can get crossed, what the symptoms are.
Whenever you're sitting down and you have to think about what exactly a criminal in my particular unique set of field work, what they could be charged with, you have to kind of start piling up everything, look at it from a subjective point of view and say, do they actually meet this? Did they actually hit this point, this specific wicket? It allows you to have a productive conversation with your doctor. Just don't be taking the wrong information and start saying that it is objectively this. Think of it as if you're teaming up with your doctor. You guys are partners and you're both solving this crime. Hey, you know what? It could be bipolar 2. I have heard that it's difficult to diagnose, or sometimes it's often missed. So this is what it could be. The doctor might look at you and say, hey, you could be very well right.
Another huge step that will radically transform your life is seeking support from people who understand what you're going through. We've talked about our Sangha here all the time. We're on Discord, we're on Patreon, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. We're probably on your Samsung smart refrigerator.
Actually, yes.
But the key takeaway here is find someone who understands. It can be a local support group. It can be us online. Just make sure it's a positive, helpful, healthful space.
Talking with people who've dealt with something similar to you, whether it's dealing with a misdiagnosis or somebody who's going through the same mental health traumas and situations that you are, it can make a world of difference. It really feels like you're walking a path hand in hand with somebody else. It can help you feel seen and can help you feel heard.
An important conversation I want to add for your boundary work. And in order to be on the same page, a question we ask here in my home is, do you want me to listen or do you want me to help? Because sometimes all you need is someone to let you vent. And sometimes you do need these actionable steps.
And if you're not really sure what to do, or you're not sure what step one for building a community is, reach out to us, right? Hit us up on our Facebook, Instagram, social media, emails, comments. We read all of it. Somebody messages us and they're just trying to vent and they just want to talk a little bit to somebody who's unbiased and a third party like Aaron and I. Hey, we're here for you guys. That's what No Streetlights is all about.
We've talked to a lot of people about a lot of things, and we've got one or two things accomplished.
Yeah. No matter what, you deserve support. Period.
If you're listening to this and thinking, that's me, I don't think I've been diagnosed correctly, we want you to walk away from this recognizing that you're not alone and there is hope. Having a misdiagnosis can feel like a dead end, but it's not the end of your story. It's just the beginning of a new chapter.
Don't think of it as you're doomed and your mental health is going to stagnate here. Just think of it as you and your doctors have a little bit more investigative work to do. You're taking the first couple of steps. You're listening to No Streetlights. I mean, hey, that's what we're all about. If you have any doubt, No Streetlights it out, baby.
So, in summary, today we talked about what misdiagnosis is and how it can happen sometimes. We shared our personal stories and talked about one of my favorite past guests. We talked about several of our past guests and gave you some actionable steps. Mostly, we talked about trusting yourself, seeking second opinions if you don't feel like you identify with the first suggestion you get, and then track your symptoms so you have evidence to support your claim. You need to advocate for yourself. You need to educate yourself in a wise fashion. And if you still feel like you can't, find support. When self-care fails, community care must prevail.
If you got something valuable from this episode, let us know or share it with a friend or a couple. Let's spread the knowledge. You never know when it could be important for somebody to hear, hey, I've been there too, and just get a little bit of a helping hand.
Make sure and check the show notes for this episode. We've got a sponsorship with BetterHelp. If you use our code betterhelp.com/NSLP, gets you a discount, helps out the show a lot. You know, whatever you need, we are here for you. So let us know how we can help you.
We do have a lot of great conversations coming at you in this core series. Our next episode, we're going to be diving into the youth mental health crisis, and I don't think you're going to want to miss it.
I'm really excited to talk about depression and anxiety specifically, since that's what Tim and I live with. I would love to get some help activating my parasympathetic nervous system. So, thank you all for being here with us on this first episode of No Streetlights Core. It means a lot that you spent this time with us. We tackled a pretty heavy topic, but hopefully you feel a little lighter and a little more hopeful than you did 20 minutes ago.
So, until next time, be good to yourselves and each other.
We love you.
Peace!
No street lights, but we're finding our way. In the dark, but we've got something to say.